Okay, so good evening, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here today with my colleagues Priscila, Raquel, Ellen, and Julio. We have proposed this roundtable entitled Doing Critical TBLT Across the Americas, not only because we believe it's important to give visibility to critical perspectives and how they can be integrated or intersected with TBLT, but also because we would like to have a space for us to promote critical reflection on that topic. So, bearing this in mind and considering that needs analysis is essential for TBLT, we argue here that we should also consider how inequality and oppression they intersect with language use.
And we argue that in order for a task to be critical, we need to include another component, another key feature. And that feature would be related to the development of learners' critical consciousness, which is a concept coined by Paulo Freire, this Brazilian scholar. And he calls it conscientização. I'm going to be talking about it very briefly. But it's basically the idea that we are going to be engaging in this development of understanding the world through critical lenses.
Highlight that critical tasks as a researched pedagogy emerged in Brazil in the Brazilian context back in 2018 with the studies of two of our presenters, Priscila Farias and Leonardo Silva, my former advisees, who at that time attempt to understand possibilities for critical tasks as well as their impact on learners' language development.
Building that critical language awareness for students of Spanish and speakers of Spanish, whether they identify as second language speakers or heritage speakers, it's important for them to be able to situate the language that they are engaging in and to understand the dimensions of language and power and how those play out in an educational realm, especially as a language. We talk a lot about how language can serve as a mechanism of inclusion or a mechanism of exclusion. And language can serve in terms of providing equitable access to valuable educational opportunities, such as preserving their home language, maintaining their home language while they develop, academic abilities and comprehension and production in English.
So this is an example of a critical task in which students need to create a meme that promotes plural lingualism. So we have a module called Linguistic Ideologies. And this is very important for us because one, not only we are trying students to understand sometimes why people have these beliefs around language, right? That these language ideologies exist, but also how these language ideologies are embedded in bilingual education, right? So that they can end up teaching, dual immersion school that have certain ideologies. And my goal is for them to be able to recognize what are those ideologies, right? And, in that specific program. So I tell them, when I train my doctoral students, I'm like, we want them to be able to name them and to recognize them, and then they can behave and react right as they feel it's appropriate.
But we're open to Q&A in case anyone is interested or has any questions or would like to continue the conversation.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for all the professors' wonderful presentation. I have a question for Professor Serafini. So for the during task about the action, so students need to work in small groups to select scaffolding strategies for before, during, and after reading phases. So does that mean that students need to work out the strategies, or you provide some options for them to select?
That's a really good question. So this course was for advanced Spanish 400 level course. So this is kind of the first time they were exposed to bilingual pedagogy, and they were specifically given strategies based on Ofelia Garcia's work in 2009. I can't remember what chapter it was, but she has 2 chapters, I believe, in that book devoted to biliteracy acquisition and development, and then a pedagogical chapter focused, I think it's called like biliteracy workshop. And so the students read about and selected certain scaffolding strategies to promote reading comprehension, contextualize the meaning of what they're reading, relate the content to their own lives.
So for Julio, my question for you is, how do you assess critical TBLT outcomes?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We don't have time to go into, we were going to have a discussion about challenges, but that's one of, this is a new area that we are developing, right? In TBLT. Well, our colleagues in Brazil have been working on this, right, for a while now. But one of the challenges is on developing how is the critical task by, the fact that we change people's ideas. For example, in this case of the critical mean, that what was the discussion? How do we measure that? So to go back to that, is it that people change their ideas about language ideologies, right? Or is it more for the students, right? That they're aware of this and that is enough. So it's really, if we think about Freire's work, that critical pedagogy is to transform, right, communities and so forth. It's really, I am still struggling with that part.
I wanted to go back really quickly to your question to Julio about how do we measure critical language awareness and agency as an outcome of critical task? Because that is the objective of critical task, is to serve as a way to develop this as an outcome rather than, complexity, fluency, accuracy, which have all been well researched and well documented and empirically measured in the field of TBLT, right, in the more mainstream area. And so it's an open question of how to best measure critical language awareness. And I think one of our key points is that it's always localized.
And now I have a question for Leo. How do you do critical TBLT needs analysis?
Okay, that's a good question. And I guess it's connected to many of the aspects that have been discussed by Ellen as well. So, first of all, a critical needs analysis is a type of analysis that would go beyond understanding a student's linguistic needs, but actually understanding the social-political contexts in which they are inserted, and also moving from an individualistic perspective to a more community-based understanding of students' needs. So we understand a needs analysis not as a phase that takes place prior to a language course, but as a continuous process. So I believe that critical needs analysis takes place as we get to know students in depth. But not only the students, but also thinking about the social-political context in which they are inserted. So you can think about the macro level, the meso level, the micro level. So when Ellen talked about the project that she conducted with her students, in which they would have focus groups, interviews, they would analyze like teaching policies, language teaching policies. So what we have been observing is that we need to consider everything that has been going on in society and how they might impact the classroom, because the classroom is not disconnected from the real world, right?
Sure. That makes a
So
lot of sense.
I guess it's very complex, yes, but it's
It is
a
complex. It's
process.
probably very easy. This is just my personal sort of observation. It's probably easy to adopt a sort of a top-down approach with the instructor deciding on the themes. It's probably not that easy. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's probably not as easy to actually adopt a bottom-up approach. In other words, to have students articulate their needs for critical
Mhm.
TBLT.